my story started obviously at birth. My mum, when I was in the womb, my mum had toxemia. So she was very sick, and this was back in 1967, and it was a big deal then. So the doctors were clear that once they discovered how unwell she was, that either I was going to die if I stayed in the womb, or that she was going to die giving birth. So it was a big deal. So they rushed her into hospital as soon as they knew, and they chopped me out at 7 months gestation, and I was a little 2'9" bubba. So I was literally what my dad called me a drowned rat, is what my dad said I looked like, a little drowned rat. And they used to carry me around, and to show how small I was, in a 2-pound butter basket. So if you imagine 2 pounds of butter in a little basket, that's how big I was. So I was literally tiny. I spent the first 6 weeks in an incubator with tubes and very unwell. And my mum used to have to express breast milk, and it would come in through the tubes. And I was very lucky to be alive. And I then developed, as I grew, I developed at the age of 5. I was a chronic asthmatic with hay fever and allergies and bugs and flus, and every year I would get every cold and every flu and every bug that went around. I was always sick, and I ended up on 16 shots of Ventolin a day, steroid Ventolin, and that went on for about 20 years. So shots in the morning to get out of bed, shots during the day to get through the day, shots to go to sleep. A lot of drugs, and Intel prevention, which was a breathing apparatus, and then steroid injections as well in the veins in the arms. So it was a real 20 years of really ill health and not pleasant, but that's all I knew. That's all I knew. I didn't know what it was to be healthy. I didn't know that there was an option called being healthy. I just knew being sick, and acne and bad skin and all kinds of stuff. And so the interesting thing was I was on the drugs, and I was constantly told that it was genetic, that it was bad luck, bad genes. You're sick, Jason, take the drugs. That's the best we can do, And these were good doctors. They really were. They were trying their best. They had no tools. They didn't know to suggest that asthma might be to do with diet. They didn't know any of those things. So I just carried on. I took the drugs and went through school and went out into the world and left school at 15 and started work. And it wasn't until I was 20 that I got prodded by someone. I was living with a naturopath at the time. She was studying to be a naturopath. And I was sitting on the side of the bed, breathing heavily and taking my Ventolin before I could go to sleep, and she turned to me in a kind of a fit of rage, and it was one of those moments, in life you have those moments, one conversation that changes your path in life.
Yeah.
We shared this conversation where she said to me, how are you going to be a good father when you can't even get out of bed without taking drugs? You can't get through the day without taking drugs, and you can't go to sleep without taking drugs. How are you going to keep up with your kids? You're 20, you should be in the prime of your life, Why don't you change your diet? And I remember being so angry. I was so angry. I was so triggered, because what had my diet got to do with asthma? What do you mean my diet to do with asthma? Diet to do with my skin?
Breathing condition.
Exactly. It's a breathing condition with the chest and all that, And so I had no education at all. And so I remember sitting there stewing on the side of the bed, really triggered, really angry. She went off to sleep, and I sat there and I sulked. I sulked for maybe 2 days or so. And then I finally got to the realization that actually, if I could actually not have asthma, if I could be well, that would be an amazing thing. That would change my life. I'd be able to run and exercise and do all these things and without taking the drugs. And I thought, yeah, I would like that. I would like it. And it was all about becoming a father, because I became a father at 21. And so it was all about that commitment to be a good dad and wanting to be able to keep up with the children and be healthy. And so I then walked down to the local health food store the next day, which was a place called Harvest Whole Foods in Grey Lynn.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, still there. It's an amazing place, yeah. So I walked down there and looked in the door, and started chatting to people there. And I bought some nut meat, some sanitarium nut meat, and chopped it up at home with some fruit and vegetables, and had this disastrous salad that I made. But that was the point that started my journey, was that moment was, what if it wasn't genetics? And that started an entirely different paradigm for me, a different attitude, thinking. And of course, now I do presentations on genetics. I teach on genetics and how you are not your genetics, you're your genetic expression. How your gut expresses is up to you, as to what you feed it expresses differently. So I got to the age of, I would have been 21. I changed my diet quite radically. So I instantly went from your typical Kiwi diet to being a strict vegan, plant-based eating. And I started regular fasting. And I know we're going to be talking about fasting today. So, I've got some funny stories about that, which we can touch on. So I started fasting regularly. I started eating a plant-based whole food diet. I gave away the meat, the alcohol, all the junk foods, everything. I started going to bed early. I started doing yoga, getting up in the morning early and having a routine. Started swimming in the morning, doing breaststroke to increase my lung strength. And over the course of 5 years, I cured everything. And so by the time I was 25, I'd cured my asthma, my hay fever, my allergies, my flus, my bugs, my colds. My skin was completely cleared up, no acne, no digestive issues, no bloating, no weight problems. All of it was cured. And all I'd done was change my diet, my lifestyle, and my environment. And that was kind of the beginning of the journey for me. And it's amazing. And people say to me, you're so... People would say to me, you're so irritatingly healthy. I got into my mid-30s after being healthy for 10 years. And they'd say, God, you really annoy me because you're so healthy and you're so glowing and you're irritating, you're so well. And I'd say to them, I wasn't always well. This has been a new phenomena for me. Most of my life at that point, I've been sick every day. And I would always be in bed with flus and allergies and sinus problems and breathing and, just trying to breathe, just trying to get air in the lungs was a big deal for me for most of my life, So I used to find it funny when people would say, you're such an inspiration, you're so healthy. And I'd say, well, they'd say, oh, it must be good genetics. And I'd always say, well, it's nothing to do with genetics. I changed what I did, how I lived my life. And anyway, now I've been a health researcher for 30 years and I'm now a granddad. I've got 4 adult children and I've raised them all with good foods and the things I've learned. And what I've learned along the way is that when you look at your health, there's 4 things that dictate to your health, whether you get heart disease or cancer, how long you live, your energy levels, 4 things that dictate all of that. And the first one is diet, what you eat, how much you eat. The second thing is lifestyle, and that's, do I drink alcohol, do I smoke cigarettes, do I do drugs, do I stay up late, those things. And then more the behavioural area. And the third one is environmental. And the environment is, where do I live? Do I live in a cold climate or a warm climate? Do I live next to a nuclear radiation dump? If I do, I'm going to die of nuclear radiation sickness. Doesn't matter how many green smoothies I have, I'm still going to die from sickness. So the environment can trump your diet and your lifestyle. So, and then the fourth one is genetics. And when you actually really delve into the research, which is what I've been doing for 30 years, I'm a health researcher and a speaker and a best-selling author. And when I was writing my first book, Eat Less, Live Long, I really started to look at the epidemiology and the longevity studies. And one of the interesting things that's really stood out with the longest lived cultures is that they eat dramatically less than we do, and they often go without food. Hence, the fasting conversation. So when you really look at those 4 pillars, genetics is about 1 to 3% of our disease. So you look at how long you're going to live, 1 to 3% is dictated to by your genetics. And 97% is about what you do every day. So when you really start to understand that concept, and for a lot of people that's quite a head shift, it's quite a, whoa, you mean just because my mum had breast cancer doesn't mean I'm going to get breast cancer? Just because my dad had a heart attack doesn't mean I'm going to have a heart attack? When you start to understand that, it is a bit of a world changer, a game changer, because you suddenly start to see everything differently. You go, oh.
A lot of control.
Exactly. You have control over your environment, and that's why in my second book, my first golden rule is be prepared and control your environment. And if you start to control your environment, like right here in this environment where we're talking, there's a glass of water next to me. So for the next hour or 2 or 3 hours, however long we talk, all I've got access to is a glass of water. Right? And I can have a sip of the water. Huh? But if there was McDonald's here or cola drinks or junk food or rubbish, I might grab that. I mean, I wouldn't because I choose what I eat. But you know what I mean? In my environment, what's in your environment is where you go to. And a lot of people make that mistake. They jump into being healthy or they try fasting or whatever, but they don't change their fundamental environment. And you have to change that if you want to be well, because when you wake up and you're tired and you're emotional and you reach for food, you're going to reach for whatever's there. And if there's an apple there, or if there's a pile of 3-week-old chips, you'll have the chips if they're there, you'll have the apple if it's there, or I'll have the glass of water if it's here. So, diet, lifestyle, environment. So yeah, I've had quite an interesting journey where I can honestly say it is so worth it to be healthy. I've had the best time. Since I was 25 to now, I haven't been sick. I've had no colds, no flus, no bugs, no virus, nothing. And I'm around sick people all over the world. I travel all over the world, I speak. I'm around sick people all the time. I never get sick. And I used to be sick every day for 20 years. So I'm a really good example of that it's actually not your genetics, but it's what you do with your genetics. It's what you do with your genetic expression in your gut, your microbiome, and how that expresses itself as to how well you are. So that led me to speaking and teaching and writing the books, and here we are today.
Amazing. It sounds like you've lived like two lives. You know, one
Yeah.
where you're extremely unhealthy and now like extremely healthy.
Yeah,
for such a
that's
long
exactly
period
it.
of time.
Yeah, I
And
have.
Is that a strong why for you in terms of like, you know how bad it is to not have your health?
Yes, I do. Yeah, it's a real driver for me, and I can still get myself tired or run down, if I allow myself to eat a little bit of junk food, because I eat what I call a plant-based whole food diet,
Yeah.
which is, just plants, lots of them, legumes and beans and nuts and seeds and fruits and vegetables, and I regularly fast. So for example, today I'm fasting. As we're talking about this, I'm fasting. And I've been fasting on and off for 35 years, so I've got an enormous experience in fasting, and we can talk about that today. And we'll go into all kinds of different fasts and how you do it and all those things. But the why is really big for me. I know what it's like to have to rely on drugs and not be able to do the things you want to do, and I now know what it's like to be well. And it's day and night. I ain't going back. Yeah, it's day and night for me. It is so worth it, and that's what gives me my passion to speak about this. And I've dedicated my life to, inspiring healthy longevity. That's what I've dedicated my life to, because I want to make the kind of difference that's happened to me, because there was no one there to teach me when I got well. I had to read books, I had to buy books from America, and I had to wait for them to come for 3 months on the post, and I had to go to the library and photocopy things. There wasn't this amazing thing called Google, or the internet. So I love the fact that that what I can do now can make a difference for others,